Great, I can start. So, hi everybody, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks to everyone for joining so far. We have a lot of people and participants on this webinar, and probably people that are watching live on another social media platform somewhere. My name is Kalsoom Lakhani. I'm the co-founder and general partner of iDive Ventures, and I am a frequent moderator at Bach Launch. Anytime Ali tells me to do something, I'll just say yes. So happy to be here today and happy to be moderating these two amazing gentlemen that we have on the panel today. Different backgrounds, both of them are building amazing unicorn companies. So I'll let them introduce themselves really briefly. You have their bios. But basically what I wanted to kind of set as groundaries today, as we kind of get into the webinar, is that I have a bunch of questions for them. I'm really curious about them and have done a lot of rabbit hole research on their journeys. So I'm sure you guys are quite curious as well. And we will be really kind of talking about, what that journey was, what scaling businesses really mean to the point of, the topic of this webinar. But then also what I would love for you guys to do is if you have questions, you'll be sending them probably DMing them to Ali on here. If you can't put it into, there we go. If you can't put it into the chat box, and Ali will be sharing that with us. So I will try to get to as many questions as possible to make this conversation free flowing. So what I'll do is I'll just throw it to Summer first. Summer, who's the co-founder of Temporal. If you want to do a quick hello, quick introduction to yourself, and then I'll throw it to Asif, and then we'll dive right in. So go ahead.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for having me here. It's a pleasure to be part of this community and share my experiences. Let me start from the beginning. I've been in the software industry for over 22 plus years. I actually started my career way back in 99 in Lahore. There was a bank, ABN AMRO Bank. They opened their IT center. So in Lahore. So I was part of the very early folks who was part of that setup. So that was interesting year and a half period at ABN AMRO before I got hired here by Microsoft. That's how I came here in US. That was around 2000. Since then, I've been living here in the greater Seattle area, and working for various companies. So the first decade for me here at Microsoft was part of different teams like .NET Framework, CLR, SQL Server, Visual Studio, BizTalk, and stuff like that. Basically a mix and match of building developer platforms, tooling, and server products. By then, the cloud started picking up, and then I really wanted to try out the cloud side of things. Back then, Microsoft was not a fun place if you really want to get some exposure to cloud. So I ended up going over the bridge, joined Amazon. So I joined the Simple Workflow team at AWS. This is actually where I met my other co-founder, Max, for the first time. He was a tech lead for Simple Workflow service. And I worked with him as actually one of the founding members to work on the publicly available version of the service, which is still out there. Then in 2012, after shipping Simple Workflow, I actually ended up coming back to Microsoft Azure side of things this time. I was a tech lead for a project called Event Hubs, which is, you can think of Kafka as a hosted service, although it's a completely homegrown stack. It doesn't use Kafka underneath the covers. So I basically tech lead that project. But as a side project, I built this open source library by the name of Durable Task Framework, which was similar ideas like Simple Workflow, but kind of bringing it into the Azure ecosystem and especially targeting .NET developers. That was actually my very first attempt at building an open source project. Since then, I've been kind of huge fan of the entire open source ecosystem. So that actually organically grew big enough where a few years ago, Azure Functions team ended up taking a dependency on it to build what they are now calling as durable functions. Then around 2015, Uber opened up office here in Seattle. So I actually one of the very early members in the Seattle engineering team. And out of coincidence, both me and Max actually ended up joining within a month of each other. It was purely a coincidence, no like we were not even aware of each other's plan back then. So over there, by the time we joined Uber, Uber was going through an interesting phase. They had more microservices that actually engineers in the company. So one of the problems that we saw over there was like people building the business applications by stitching together these microservices. So this is where we started another open source project by the name of Cadence, which actually became super popular within, not only within Uber, but actually we started getting a lot of external traction for it outside of the company. In other bigger organizations like HashiCorp, LinkedIn, Airbnb, Coinbase, Checker, DoorDash. There was a long list of engineers who kind of adopted that technology in those places. So this is where basically both me and Max start thinking about the next step. We believe we have something which is very broadly applicable to a wide class of problems out there. So we decided to take the leap, started Temporal in October 2019. And then since then, we kind of have grown the company, which is now over 100+ people. We have a very thriving open source community, which love building applications on top of the platform that we have built. And then now we have even a cloud service where a lot of people are actually running mission critical workload on top of our cloud service. So I'll take a pause here.
Very cool. Yeah. And I want Asif to give his intro to the one thing that I find quite interesting is even though, you know, Handshake and Temporal are in different spaces, I feel like open source, democratizing, very similar types of values here. So it's kind of cool to have you both on a panel together. I don't know if Ali orchestrated that or if that just happens to be a cool thread. But Asif, I'll let you give an intro and just a bit of your journey as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. Assalamualaikum, I'm Asif Lakhani. I grew up in Karachi and Toronto and made my way to the US as an engineer at Amazon, where I spent 11 years. And part of that, we left Seattle to start a subsidiary of Amazon called A9.com. Which was the first of its kind at Amazon, where they're trying to really incubate a startup within Amazon. And a few of us moved over to build that, focusing on building search technologies for Amazon. I'm a search engineer. Most of my career, I've built search engines. And actually, one of the things that I worked on Amazon, I led the creation of Amazon Cloud Search, which Summer, you may enjoy this, that we were one of the early beta users of SWF. So Cloud Search and Simple Workflow kind of launched in 2012 around the same time. So that was a fun ride. I launched Cloud Search. Look back, it was 11 years at the same company. I wanted to stay in search, but try a different company and had the opportunity to lead search at LinkedIn. So I moved over to LinkedIn in the Bay Area and essentially rebuilt LinkedIn search engine from the scratch, which needed to be a lot more graph aware. So we did that, and around that time, LinkedIn bought a company called lynda.com, which is an online learning company. And me, along with Ryan, who was my product counterpart now, he's the CEO of LinkedIn, we essentially led the acquisition of Lynda and built a new product called LinkedIn Learning, which was the best of Lynda married with the best of LinkedIn's network. Built LinkedIn Learning, shipped it, pivoted from B2C to B2B for various reasons I'm happy to talk about. And I always had this bug to go back to search. And I found myself at Google running image search. Did that for a couple of years, actually moved from engineering to product and kind of started as a head of product for image search and then later acquired the engineering team. And when the pandemic hit, I decided to take a break to help with my religious community. You know, with the spaces of worship shut, there were a void in the community, and we had to build engagement for our elders and our youth. And in that process, I thought that I don't want to go back to a big company and would love to go to a more mission-oriented company that is smaller in size. And that's how I found Handshake. Really the mission appealed to me, and the care for like young people appealed to me. And I've been here for a couple of years as a CTO, and we've grown tremendously. both in terms of revenue or, crossing 100 million. We crossed 100 million this last year in ARR, and we are now, we've tripled our size of the organization, close to 800 people. So yeah.
Great. Well, both of you have had, I mean, you guys were both mentioning, you guys have kind of overlapped in terms of some of the places that you've worked in terms of these large tech companies. For Summer, you then co-founding your own company. And I know that, a project that you guys worked on at your last gig kind of was the predecessor in some ways to Temporal. Just curious, like for both of you, this question, and I'll be more specific with you, Asif, but Summer first, how did, your work at, places like Amazon, Uber, Microsoft, how did those prepare you for, launching your own company and building your own company? Because obviously you saw things at scale. And then maybe did you also learn things of what not to do? Like, what did you not want to repeat based off of those experiences as well?
Yeah. So you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So if you like from my journey, if one of the common themes is like I'm first of all, I'm not the kind of founder like who have this idea one day, wake up next day, and then build a company around it. Like this is a problem space that I've been kind of iterating over for like over 12 plus years now. So my journey at like Amazon, Microsoft, Uber, especially like that played a huge role in kind of getting both me and Max to where we are right now. So because starting from simple workflow, we've been kind of like we saw this problem, like both of us come from a background of building these large scale enterprise services, especially messaging systems, which typically is a backbone for any cloud application. And then we see this pattern again and again, every time we go from one large enterprise to another enterprise. And both of us actually loves working bottoms up with real engineers solving real problems. So one of the things that a startup typically kind of focuses on early on, and sometimes they struggle with, is finding the product market fit. So one of the interesting things about Temporal when we started it as a company, and we used to hear this a lot, that, oh, Temporal is an interesting company. They have a product market fit without a product yet. And the reason we used to hear that is because of our earlier experience in these larger places like Amazon, Microsoft, and Uber, because that helped us shape the technology, work with real engineers who have real problems and solve those problems through the platform that we have been trying to iterate over for over a decade. And to answer your other question, essentially, like, what are the things key learning for me is, if you look at the first few iterations, every time kind of we focus building on these developer platforms and as proprietary systems. So one of the key learnings for us essentially during at least the first couple of iterations is these kind of systems needs to be built as an open source project. And actually that's why at Uber, when we started the Cadence project, we started it as an open source project from the get-go. And in my opinion, that played a huge role in kind of building the developer community around that platform.
Great. And just to quickly, as a follow-up question, because maybe people in the audience may not be aware, but I'm also curious, what does PMF look like without a product? Like, what does that mean? Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sorry, when you say PMF, what
when you were talking about product market fit without a product? Okay.
Yeah. What does it look like? Yeah. So it's one of my, actually the first decade at Microsoft, I've been worked with super smart people, and like especially around Microsoft as a company actually cares hugely about developer experience. I don't know if people have seen, there's an old video, if you search for Steve Ballmer, like he was on a stage and then just probably 5 minutes just doing this rant of developer. So Microsoft as a company is like hugely, like they have done tons and tons of investments around building the developer community, and then people building that community to build all sorts of applications on top of Windows platform. one of the things that I've learned is a lot of innovation that happens at Microsoft is sometimes they are very disconnected with, they're trying to come up with experiences on their own without building this feedback loop with the actual developers. So when I say product market fit, one of the interesting things how both me and Max operates is we have evolved this platform by solving real developer problems. Each and every feature in our platform, actually, I can tie it to a real life outage that I have seen in my past lives in those places. So when I say product market fit is essentially especially for a startup during the early stages, creating this, what's the value proposition of what you are building, why someone should be, what are the key differentiators, who are your like competitors, and how do you differentiate your platform against those competitors? So that is overall, that's what I describe as a product market fit. And temporal, because of this decade of iteration of working with real developers, solving their real problems. I think one of the things which was amazing when we started the company is we already had this product which people find it useful for their day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, especially because you guys are so community driven with so many meetups, you're staying really close to the developers and their problems as well, which I think is great. Asif, I want to throw a similar question to you. I think it's really interesting to hear that during the pandemic, you decided to take a pause to support, your own religious community, but you similarly had, a lot of experience at these larger companies, right? Amazon, LinkedIn, and then made a decision, obviously the pandemic might have driven that, but unlike Summer, you came in, you were not a co-founder of Handshake, but you came in later on in their journey. I think they started in 2014, I believe, and you came in 2020, probably at a very important inflection point, but in the middle of the pandemic. So just curious for you, like what did you learn from, that you brought into the company at the time that you were joining? And then also just what drove that decision really to join at a time where, things were so uncertain in the world?
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting time for all of us. So as I said, I'm a search engineer and I look at everything as a search problem. So when I was presented Handshake, I looked at it as a search problem. It's a matching problem. How do we help students find the right opportunities? How do we help employers find the right candidates? And there's some very interesting kind of technical problems there in terms of matching and finding the right recommendations, looking at kind of student behavior and finding the right kind of propensity for them to apply to a particular job. So actually, a lot of my experience and thinking at LinkedIn were directly translatable to my product thinking at Handshake. So that was definitely something that was not new to me. And on top of that, my counseling with students in my community also gave me a kind of understanding of like how this age segment thinks and what they're looking for. One of the things that was apparent to me in all my research and communications with this segment was that young people are frustrated in better representing themselves. They do not want a static LinkedIn profile. They want their whole selves to be shown to the world. And can Handshake or somebody like Handshake provide a forum for them to be seen the way they want to be seen? There are lots of folks in the margins that do not have degrees from a tier 1 university, but definitely have the skills, but they don't get noticed. LinkedIn is not necessarily optimized for people without rich experience, deep education or deep network. So how do we help this new generation of workers kind of seed themselves into the industry in the right trajectory for them? So I think all those problems were not foreign to me based on my community work and my LinkedIn work. And then on top of that, I think Handshake, as you point, was at an inflection point. They had product market fit. They had, most universities and schools in the US were now on Handshake. As a result, we had access to more students. But now the question was, how do we scale this forward? And I joined Amazon, and my first problem at Amazon was, hey, everybody thinks of us as a bookstore, but we sell so much more than books. So can you help us expose the rich inventory? So, I've seen Amazon go from 2001 to now in terms of, powering all of internet from a bookstore, and similarly, the growth at LinkedIn. So I thought that was a good fit for both, Handshake and I, in terms of bringing my value of taking an organization at that junction and helping it scale the next 1, 2, 3 levels.
Did they find you, or did you find them?
I had been working with a recruiter, and I kind of kept narrowing my constraints to would love to be in an executive position at a pre-IPO company focusing on education, and there's just not too many open opportunities at that time.
But very cool that you found something that kind of fit that sweet spot of what you were looking for.
Absolutely. Very, very lucky to be here. Yes.
And I think, to that point of, what you were just talking about, the inflection point with Handshake, before they became a unicorn, it took them a little bit longer than Temporal. Temporal took 3 years, but they became a unicorn in 2021. So well into your path of, being the CTO there, I want to kind of, talk through and break down and unpack this word unicorn, right? It's one of the biggest buzzwords that we use in the startup space and the tech space everywhere. I think a lot of times, like, people overuse it, or people like to think about that as their, that's the goal that they want to achieve. But I want to understand for you guys, what has becoming a unicorn, for Temporal, as I mentioned, it took you guys about 3 years to do that, which is a massive feat. Handshake 2014 to 2021. But what is becoming a unicorn meant to you individually, but also to your companies? And when you achieve that milestone, because I think that's the big thing too. It's like, when you achieve that milestone, what happens after that, right? Like, I know with Handshake, it's that you continue increasing the value of your company, but there's a lot of pressure that happens when you become a unicorn. So I'd love for both of you to unpack that, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I can start. Well, I think it's also an interesting question given the market corrections in terms of multiples.
Yeah.
We passed $1 billion when valuation multiples were very high. I think we are still a unicorn with the current discounted multiples, but honestly, like, in some ways, it was a date that we celebrated, and the next day we were back to work, but in many other ways, it gave us a lot of confidence that, we had 2 successive rounds, which led to us crossing $1 billion, and then, 3.5 billion in close proximity to each other. So Series E and Series F, where we went from 680 million to 1.5 to 3.5. And in parallel, our ARR growth was also phenomenal during that time, and it continues to be north of 60% year over year. As I said, crossing 100 million this last year. So for one, it was a celebration that we have built a scaled, consistently repeatable business. And at that time, the cash that we raised allowed us to scale our business further. We were able to grow our sales and engineering team significantly. We built out our data team, which is now showing great results. And in many ways similar to an IPO event, the multiple rounds of financing, along with strong revenue growth, gave us the confidence that we're here for some time. We're not going away tomorrow. And what that does is that we have a business model that works, so that we can take some risks and start thinking a little bit longer term. So the time horizon of our investments started shifting significantly. So instead of focusing on, when I first joined, we were only focusing on what we will ship in the next 2 weeks. So that scrappiness doesn't go away, but in parallel, we started charting out, okay, well, where will we be by the end of this year? That was a question that was not something we would even ask when we were smaller, but now we started to ask. So I think that the time horizon, and even started thinking about like a 3-year plan. But again, the culture just did not allow for thinking 3 years down, but we started at least moving to an annual cadence of planning. And then I think now we can have that conversation separately. That time horizon is shifting again, given the current economic climate. But I think that was at least we have now a framework to think about what's core, what's strategic, what's venture.
Summer, I'm going to ask you that similar question. For you, you guys achieved it quite fast in your journey. And congrats to both of you on that. But just curious in terms of what has that meant for you? What was that goal like, breaking it down for us?
Yeah. So as Asif said, it's basically, you celebrate one day when you close the round, and next day you get back to building your business. What it means actually for us is it's a huge responsibility, like getting to like a $1 billion plus valuation, raising funds at that valuation is in similar to basically Handshake. Like we raised it around in 2020, actually end of 2021. That was a very, very favorable market conditions to raise funds at that time. Eventually it comes down to more than the valuation. It's about the money that you raise, how you are planning to deploy that money. And that is one of the things which is very clear, at least in these circumstances. The cost of capital is very, very high. Raising money is not as simple as it used to be a year ago. And which means the cost of actually failure is also very high. Back then, you can try out many things, and then, okay, it doesn't matter. We used to do our operating plan, and as part of the operating plan, you typically think about what are the bottlenecks. And we never put capital as a bottleneck, essentially based on our operating plan in previous years. This year, capital is actually one of the bottlenecks essentially for planning for next year. And so there, for us, essentially what it means is that added responsibility that comes in is what we are doing with that capital, how we are deploying that capital, and how we are kind of building the business. There is a lot of due diligence that goes in after you cross that threshold.
Thanks for saying that. We have a ton of questions in the chat. I'm going to get to a few more of mine, but I do want to try to get to as many of your questions as possible, because I feel like this is definitely a webinar that has attracted a lot of people. I did want to actually touch on something that Ali put in the chat, though, before I go into my next question, which is the fact, Summer, you were just talking about, raising and what that means, the responsibility of it. But also the fact, I did not know this did not come up in my research, that Temporal apparently raised your Series B of $100 million without a deck. Can you just tell us how that happened?
Yeah. So it comes down, I think eventually it comes down to the same product market fit question. So actually, one of the interesting things is around the time when we were raising our B round, there were just so many VCs just in our Slack room for the community and just messaging people like, oh, how are you using Temporal? And what are your use cases? What's your experience? And building, so for us, building that community, building that validation, even though we are in the very early stages of building the product. Like back then, by the way, we didn't even have a GA cloud service, which we could even sell. But the validation for the product that we were building was so obvious because of the community that we have built around it. Venture itself essentially is kind of changing, at least the way because there's so many, a lot of these big venture companies like Sequoia, like A16Z Index, all of those are slowly now kind of trying to invest into companies which is in the very early stages. And another thing which is very different, at least maybe from 10 years ago, is specialization. There are people who are specializing. For example, for us, we are in enterprise, like enterprise software, cloud software. And there are like, and considering the margins in any company who qualifies in this bucket, just the margins are so high. It's a very, very attractive business for VCs to kind of invest into. So, so there's just so many people who are now specialized in this specific area where they is fierce, like everyone is trying to find the winner. One of the interesting things about like startups is if you look at the price for being number one versus the price for being number two in that category or three, it's just let's say you are getting a Lexus for being number one, but for number two you are getting okay, iPhone. So it's just so much difference if to finding those winners. So all of those VCs are trying to figure out, try to intercept that as early as possible.
Yeah. And I feel like that constant competition, and also there's like FOMO that's created, right? Especially in 2021, that was like a constant thing.
So yeah, so it's all about creating that demand. It's
Mhm.
about supply and demand.
Yeah.
And so, so I think Temporal was able to position themselves because of this community, which was built around the product, as something super, super attractive for VCs. So just because of we were able to create that competition so early on, which really helped us with our B round, essentially.
Very cool. So we unpacked unicorn for you guys and what that's meant, the responsibility that comes with it, how you guys think differently now. I want to unpack another buzzword that's actually the title of the webinar today, which is scaling businesses, right? So, and as someone who's been an investor in Pakistani startups, like a lot of times, you know, you guys are at a stage where no Pakistani company has yet reached. Inshallah, we will, right? But scale is something that we often drop as a buzzword without really unpacking what that means. And oftentimes we don't even understand the levers that need to be in place in order for us to achieve growth and that inflection point, and how that then leads to scale. So I'd love to hear from both of you, maybe Asif first, in terms of, you know, you guys have both played a significant, obviously some are since the very beginning, Asif obviously at a very important point at Handshake. What does scale mean for you at your companies? But then also, how do you distinguish between growth and scale? When does it click in? When is it safe to scale? Would love for you to dive into that.
Yeah. So just a little bit about our business. We are essentially a marketplace, and a three-sided marketplace. So we have students and employers, but we also have universities and education partners. And we consider internally, we say that we're entering a third era of scale, where we actually looked at each side of the marketplace. We started by becoming the career services platform for universities and colleges. So there, you know, it was about going door to door and getting one university at a time to use their platform and becoming the career services platform for them. Through that, we were able to kind of, you know, get access to our students and be able to better serve the students. The second era was essentially employers, where, you know, we had a freemium model where we, again, you know, allowed any manager of any company to be able to come in and, you know, get access to be able to post jobs to students and get qualified candidates, right? So, and now we're entering what we say is the third era of scale, which is to be able to have every student come off into Handshake and find meaningful value outside of when they're actually, you know, once or twice a year looking for a job. So in that, so I share that because I think just from a product market fit standpoint, every era we had kind of different goals in terms of what scale means, what growth means. We had certain parameters right from the beginning that we will not charge students ever, that we would always have a kind of a freemium model that allows employers to come in and get the core benefits of our platform and then upsell to a premium SKU. So I think getting some of those foundations right, that allows you to kind of keep growing efficiently. And that's really kind of how we think about growth versus scale. You can keep growing by putting a lot of capital, but you can scale where it's kind of almost sublinear without putting the same amount of investment for every new customer that you onboard, right? So I think we were able to kind of hit that with both universities and employers. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing I would say is focus on quality as you scale. For example, we are now opening our network so that students have access to all jobs, not just the ones that are posted by their campus and approved by their schools only. Now, when we open the network, we were able to scale that through technology, but the fear is spam in the system. If you don't have quality jobs for students, if you don't have quality candidates for employers, how do we ensure high signal to noise ratio? So I think in parallel to scale, ensuring that your core value propositions are not getting diluted, that the quality of your value is not getting diluted, I think is one of the key areas of focus for us right now. And then lastly, what I would say is that from a technology standpoint, it's okay to rebuild infrastructure for the next scale. I think we don't need to over-engineer for 2-3 levels out. If, for example, eventually we know we need to build out a more sophisticated search engine that is graph aware. But for now, a flatter, simpler index works for us that kind of connects jobs with students. So at every stage of growth, find the minimum viable product that you need to build, be able to scale to the next level, but you don't need to scale for the next 2 levels. So I think those are some of the guiding principles.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to Summer, because you were talking about scaling from a tech perspective and an infrastructure perspective, have there been what has been your biggest challenge and Summer, you can address that too when you answer. What has been your biggest challenge in scaling a business from a technology perspective?
Yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, let me first kind of go over the machine that we are building. I think at the end of the day, it's about as a business, what is this repeatable? You keep on hearing this term that building this machine which is repeatable, essentially, where you just put cash in and then you generate revenue out of it, essentially. So for us, it's 4 dimensions. For the first one is open source, like building this community. So for us, the more investments we make, the bigger the community is, the better for us, Temporal as a company. And so the very first part of the machine for us is essentially invest into community and grow that community. Second one is win small and large logos. So like all of the community which is adopting the technology, getting them winning those logos to become paying customers on top of Temporal Cloud is basically the second part for us, essentially.
Can you clarify that a little bit more, just for the plebes in the audience like myself? What does it mean to win small and large logos? For example,
like for us, essentially the kind of business we are building is like we have a platform which developers love building applications on top of. So that's building the community around that platform is all of the investments that go into open source side of things, which is how people are discovering us. And then if you look at our getting started experience, the developer experience, how they get started, how they learn about the technology, how they figure out how to map their use cases using the technology is basically what goes into the first phase. Second phase is logos, winning logos. Winning logos is for us, the revenue model is we do not actually monetize our open source. The thing that we monetize is we have a cloud service where we run a fully managed version of Temporal behind Temporal Cloud. and then basically having those engineers who are working for different organizations, having those applications directly run on top of temporal cloud rather than taking our open source and running it themselves. That's what I mean by winning a logo. Winning a logo is, let's say, one of our customers is Snap. Having Snap directly run their workload on top of temporal cloud is what we call as winning a logo, which is basically signing the legal documents that, oh, we are one of the vendors who are providing a service to Snap, is what basically goes into winning a logo. The third step is for us essentially is getting the real consumption, getting the real application. For us, we are a consumption-based business. Winning a logo doesn't mean anything to us from a revenue standpoint. It means a lot that now we have a way to go within that organization, talk to the developers, talk to teams, figure out what are the applications which it made sense to run on top of the developer platform or temporal platform. That's what it typically gets us. But for us, the thing which drives our business, the real revenue, is getting the consumption, having that application running on top of the platform and the meter churning essentially. So that's typically the third step for us, is getting that. So all of the investment which goes into how quickly those developers can build an application and then start running that application on top of the platform, because that's what translates for us as a revenue. And the fourth step for that machine for us is expansion. Once we get an application running, we are a platform which basically super sticky. Once a developer learns this way of building applications, they cannot unlearn it. Think about people building applications in C++ back in the 90s, but then these higher abstraction languages that Java and .NET came in, like really majority of those applications gets written because, oh, now no one have to think about garbage collection anymore. So it's exactly that kind of mentality shift that happens when a developer learns how to build an application using temporal. They keep on building new and new applications using the same primitive that we offer. So that's what we call as expansion. So those are the four typically stages for us. That's how we think about scaling our business.
That's great. And going back to the question that was in the chat, that Asif, if you want to answer this first, and then Summer, when we're thinking about technology infrastructure and scaling that, what is the biggest challenge that both of you have faced from that perspective? Asif, do you want to go first, and then maybe Summer?
It was very interesting. The year that I joined, so what we have something called back to school, which is, think of it as like our Black Friday, where we have the most number of people come because of career fairs and stuff. And it's an event from a technology standpoint, because every year we see multiple orders of growth than the previous year, and we're not able to kind of keep up and have high availability. So that became a work stream every year. Let's plan for back to school, right? And I remember my days at Amazon as well, where like, let's plan for Black Friday scaling. And at one point it became a non-event, where Amazon figured it out so that they don't need to worry about making any special work to scale for Black Friday, because the system is predictable. You can add in hardware and it kind of scales. There's no system that becomes a bottleneck, right? And you can plan way in advance because you have that predictability in terms of traffic, but you also understand how your architecture evolves. So that was kind of big change for us, where we went from back to school being a big event to now it's almost a non-event, because we now understand how our architecture works, how our kind of data flows, and where the kind of font vectors are in terms of how the data duplicates, and we understand a little bit better our architecture. Of course, there are issues. Of course, as engineers, as we put in new things last minute, things are going to fail. But I think in general, we're able to get to a point where it's a non-event. The other thing that it's not necessarily hard from a technology standpoint, but much more from a cultural standpoint, is this moving to a lot more data-driven mindset, and moving from just shipping features to actually moving the needle and kind of moving into an optimization funnel. And I think when you hit a particular steady state of traffic, then you can start investing in machine learning and AI to be able to like continuously optimizing and moving the needle. And that's actually a big mindset shift, right? Because until then, you're just thinking about, if I deploy this feature to our customers, then I think, we'll get this ROI. But now you're thinking about actually improving relevance and improving the customer experience through experimentation and through like, a lot more small wins as opposed to a few big wins. So I think that mindset of kind of using data to actually continuously improving the experience was also a big change.
Great. Thanks for that. Summer, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah. So I've built my entire career, by the way, building large scale cloud services.
Sure.
So like building those kind of systems is actually very natural, and it's part of the DNA for working here at Temporal also.
Yeah, you're helping other companies scale up, right? So
yeah, one of our exactly value proposition is like we completely hide the infrastructure for you to build those mission critical apps essentially. For us, the biggest challenge actually has been starting a company with 2 people. Especially around this, the key value proposition for us is reliability. So we actually have to think about building the culture here at Temporal very differently. We cannot operate like a lot of other startups who are like quickly experimenting. We are in the business of reliability. So yes, we need to move fast, but at the same time, we cannot be a company like, let's say, Facebook, which is move fast and break stuff. We have to move fast, but we need to figure out interesting ways to move fast without
breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't afford to break a lot of stuff.
So which actually kind of shows in the kind of culture that we have created here at Temporal is like the kind of engineering maturity that you typically see, considering I feel we are still in a very early stages of company building, but it's very different profile than a lot of other startups at our stage. So the things which actually keeps me up is about this promise of reliability. Is for us, like even a 5-minute hiccup in our system essentially is a severe business critical event for one of the organizations who are running mission critical workloads on top of us. So for us, like making sure that we can move, we can deliver features and deliver new functionality, but at the same time, this promise of reliability, keeping that was one of the bigger challenges for me.
Yeah. And I love that you said that that's what keeps you up at night, right? And to trying to get to as many questions as possible in the chat, guys. These are really good questions. So on that topic, for both of you guys as the CTOs at your respective companies, a really great question that came into the chat is, how do you measure your success? What is the most important KPI as a CTO? And obviously that'll be different depending on your company. So maybe just speak for yourselves, but I think that's a great question to be asked. Whoever wants to go first.
I can go
Sure.
first. For me, it's actually been an interesting journey. I'm a first-time founder, so I don't have a lot of experience, essentially, what a CTO is supposed to do. So, but for me, one of the things is my role keeps on changing every 6 to 12 months. So for me, one of the bigger measure for success is figuring out what's the most like critical problem to be solved as a business, and having moving the needle on that problem essentially. Sometimes it turns out recruiting. Sometimes it turns out I've played role of actually writing or designing critical parts of the system to like figuring out how to get the best talent here in the company. So on that entire spectrum, essentially like figuring out what thing to focus on and then making a difference, that's how I measure success for myself.
Great. Asif?
Yeah, I mean, I think I concur in many ways that it's a little bit of a seasonal role that changes based on the needs of the business. And for example, when we were trying to grow really fast, it was about finding the right talent and getting them onboarded and getting them contributing on their first day. So that's a different set of problems than now we have spinned off a bunch of like parallel work streams, and we want to make sure that we're executing efficiently and pound for pound where we can actually make sure that we feel like we are being efficient. So I as a CTO, one of the things that I like to do is not, pigeonhole myself as an engineering leader or product leader or design leader, but really think across all sides of the business. And that's one of the things that I expect from my leaders, is to have that sense of kind of product thinking and product taste, and to be able to not have this division between engineers and product managers and just kind of have religious battles against them, but really like challenge each other and think about, are we driving business impact? And I think that's one of the big things that I've been trying to push on, and it shows up in our career ladder and our promotion criteria and how we hire, is that, can you tie everything you do to business impact? Now, it could be short-term business impact, it could be long-term business impact. Business impact is not only kind of moving revenue, but it could be a lot of internal metrics in terms of kind of internal customer satisfaction that kind of indirectly kind of moves the needle or sustains the business. But you need to be able to justify everything that you're working on and how it is driving business impact. So I think it's seasonal, it changes, but I think if you think kind of business first in many ways, it allows the engineers to feel like, they are working on something that really matters, and they can connect in their work and how it's ultimately driving impact.
And this is your first time being a CTO, right, Asif?
In those titles, yes. The thing about both Amazon and LinkedIn and Google is that they're so large that in many ways they operate as a bunch of companies. So when I was running lynda.com, it was a subsidiary. When I was kind of driving parts of A9, it was a subsidiary within a larger company. So this notion of kind of ultimate accountability,
it's a different thing altogether, right? Was there anyone for both of you, as to your point, also, if you've had a lot of leadership roles, but this is like that, the buck stops with you from a CTO perspective. Summer, that you're a first-time co-founder. Was there anyone that inspired you, or people that you look to as a North Star, you were like, I want to be, that is like the type of CTO that I want to be like? Or did you just forge the path for yourself?
So I'm a technologist. So at least I strongly believe, especially people who are in the early phases of their career, always try to find role models, like people that you can look up to, because at least the way I grew my career is by finding those role models and getting an opportunity to work with them and to up-level myself.
And who is that for you? Can you give us a name?
For example, like Maxim, who's actually, I eventually ended up co-founding Temporal with. Like, I got the opportunity to work with him back in 2010, and then it completely changed my perspective of how to think about scalable service, cloud services. And so, but you need to be mindful essentially of what excites you, and then look for those opportunities. Look for a person that you think is the best in that trait. And then if you are lucky to get an opportunity to work with those people, that's what you should be looking for. So I even in my time at Microsoft, I worked with a lot of smart, very, very smart folks, like Don Box, for instance, essentially. And then getting those opportunities, in my opinion, it's what really helps you up level your career.
Very cool. What about for you, Asif?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to have some great managers that inspired me to be good people managers. And, I can name Igor at LinkedIn, who's I think at Google now. And, he taught me how to really empower his leaders, for example. But then I've had engineers that have reported to me that I also consider my role models. It doesn't have to be your manager, because they're like search technologists like Daniel Tungling or Sriram Sankar, who have taught me a lot about how to think about problems. And so again, I think it, as Summer mentioned, right, it's about the area, and then there's no one person that I want to be like, but I've been fortunate to work with many people up and down the chain, right?
I was gonna say, I love that for both of you. It's been people that have been your peers. In Summer's case, it was his eventual co-founder. With you, it's also people that you managed. And so not always seeking people that are above you, right? That it's not always top down when it comes to mentorship, but sometimes it's peer led, sometimes it's below you. So I love that you said that. I want to, as we kind of reach the end of today's webinar, kind of start to wrap up with some advice for you guys, for people here, based off of some questions that we've gotten. So and I've noticed this is the case. I help a lot of our companies that we invest in hire, and so many founders look for technical co-founders or look for people that are, CTO type people. What would be your advice to non-techies who want to launch a startup or are building a company that they want to identify a good tech co-founder? What would be your advice in terms of what they should be looking for?
So let me try to understand, like you are specifically asking about founders who come from a non-tech background, and
Yep.
what are the things what they should not be doing?
No, so this is a question in the chat, which is if they're looking for a technical co-founder,
Okay.
or and I'm going to add to that, right? Because
okay.
I help companies hire. A lot of times I've helped some of our companies hire their CTOs or head of engineering. What are the things that people should be looking for? We oftentimes have a lot of non-technical founders in Buxton.
Awesome.
So what should people be looking for?
Awesome. Is it okay, Asif, if I maybe can start? Okay. I can give the opposite view, by the way, because I have personal experience there. Like I feel
Looking for your non-technical co-founders.
yeah, actually both me and Max are super technical.
Yeah, I know your backgrounds.
Yeah. So one of the things that I highly recommend is as a founder, you need to be aware of your strengths, but you need to be more aware of your weaknesses. And then how you are planning to kind of complement those weaknesses. For us, it's every company is different. The culture you want to create within your company is different. First of all, deeply care about the kind of company you are building and the kind of culture, because that will set at least the foundation of what is the kind of person that you want to bring to kind of help you build that company. So thinking about culture should be forefront, essentially. In terms of some look for people who, especially, it depends on the stage. If it's very early stage, you really need to look for someone who is not who just talks, or someone who has this ability that they can roll up their sleeves, and then if it comes down to building part of the system, they can actually do that job. So look for someone who knows what good looks like. And especially if you are looking for a technical person, the only way that person knows what good looks like is when they have themselves built something amazing, essentially. So at least that would be my advice, essentially. Look for someone very practical, someone who can do the job themselves, because then they actually know what good looks like, and then they can actually bring in the right people to kind of scale that company.
Asif?
I mean, I won't speak to co-founder because I don't have a lot of experience there, but I think in general, when you're hiring a senior technologist, if you have that opportunity, I would hire for the particular job that you need and not assume that you need them forever. Now that's not necessarily true for a co-founder, but I think when you can, I think, not everybody is the best fit for every stage of the company. And then, even co-founders take a step back and bring on more experienced people that can help with the next stage. So I think I think that would be kind of the first thing I would say, is that, like, figure out exactly what job you want to be solved, and then find out, for example, if you're trying to grow a company and grow the engineering team, has this person brought on senior talent themselves before? Can they actually hire a director of engineering? Can they hire some very strong, ICs? If people are not inspired to work for them, they may be the best technologists, but they're not kind of serving the need that you have over the next 6, 9, 12 months, right? So I think that would be the first thing. Just figure out the job and be very, very clear in terms of expectations, and then everything else kind of somerset, like people who are smart and get things done, folks that are good problem solvers and are not necessarily bringing a ton of expertise only, but are able to kind of pivot and adapt and listen to people who can educate them, and they can, they're highly dynamic in that sense, because the world keeps changing under you, and I think the best problem solvers are the technologists are the best problem solvers, right?
We're over time. I've been given permission to go 2 minutes because I do want for you guys to leave everyone with some words of wisdom. We're in a really bad economic downturn right now, and especially when it relates to people who are in Pakistan, things just feel hard, right? And so any words of advice as people that are at companies that are, mashallah, doing well right now, or are growing, for people that are just starting out in their journeys, any words of advice right now for what we're dealing with in the world, and how to survive as founders and as people at the C-suite level.
Yeah. Asif, do you want to go first or?
Go for it.
Okay. Okay. I don't know whether how valuable the advice is, but for me, I think these at least I feel these downturns, there is always an opportunity hidden. I feel that right now is actually people who have ideas for what they want to build, and they can actually raise money and get funded. It's an amazing time to build companies, essentially. So people who are thinking about starting new venture, essentially, I feel it's actually a very good opportunity, because yes, there are certain raising capital is hard, but at the same time, there are one of the other dimensions of it is it's hard for people who will be competing against also. So there will be people who can actually raise money and they believe in what they are building. It's actually an amazing time right now. Think about your long term. Do not make short term decisions, essentially. Think about what you want to do a long term. One good example would be, typically I see this reaction, oh, let's cut headcount, let people go, which might be the right thing to do for the business, but redo the entire operating plan and build an operating plan. Don't be lazy, build a plan which is both best case, worst case, or something in between. Build 3 versions of it, run it through your board, find out, run pros and cons, and take whatever risk necessary to it. For some startups, it actually might be an interesting time to lean into these circumstances and actually double down, because when they come out of the other side, they would be that much stronger. So
awesome.
That would
I think that's a great piece of advice. Asif, bring us home. Next 20, 30 seconds, give us some advice.
Yeah, I think this is a time of clarity for a lot of us. I think fundamentals are coming back in the horizon, and it's bringing clarity. And I think in that clarity comes focus. So I think, I think this is what Amazon taught me, to be frugal and to be focused. And I think some of those fundamental principles are going to come in very handy for us. Being ruthless in prioritization, focus on what matters. I think those days of just trying a lot of things without kind of clear conviction are gone. I think you're back to kind of really being able to have strong conviction, and it's okay to try things. It's okay to take risks, but you need to be able to kind of see through to the end, right? For us at Handshake, it's a difficult time, because Feds want companies to actually hire less, so it actually impacts employment. But we have a charter and we have a mission, and as long as you're working on problems that actually are helping the world, you can be sure that you'll find a support system that will invest in you, and you can be sure that you're actually doing the right things to make the world a better place. So I think if you focus on the right problems, I think these economic ups and downs are you're going to be resilient. And I think resilience, focus, frugality are the principles that will take us forward.
Yeah, well, I've been really inspired by this conversation today, and thank you guys so much. Thanks to the audience for so many insightful questions that came in. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to so many of them. But you know, I think hopefully this inspires you to continue to follow both Asif and Summer's journeys, to just continue to educate yourself. And many thanks to Ali and the Block Launch team for continuing to put together some really amazing content on this platform. So thank you everybody for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Having us.
All right. Thanks guys.
Bye.
Love this.